Hi everyone, and welcome to AutoTrader Carology End of Year Special. I'm your host, Ian MacDonald. I'm the CMO over at AutoTrader.ca. And today, we're going to be looking back at 2023, the year that was. We're going to be looking at trends in inventory, pricing, consumer demand, digital retail, EV, and more across new and used automotive. But perhaps more importantly, we'll be looking ahead to 2024 and what we predict next year has in store across those same topics. Now, while we don't have a crystal ball, we do have a crystal barish. That's because I'm joined today by VP of Insights and Intelligence at AutoTrader, Baris Akirak. Baris has his eyes across all the data as the #1 marketplace, as well as data from AutoSync and DealerTrack, our other business units at Trader Corporation. He tries to use all of this to help us and you make sense of what's going on out there. So without further ado, let's get into this end of year special for AutoTrader Carology. All right, so Baris, welcome.
Thank you. I'm genuinely looking forward to this, Ian.
Yes, it's great to see you. And actually, I haven't seen as much of you just lately. I know you're out and about a lot, presenting insights and forecasts to OEMs and dealer groups and kind of industry events. How many of those have you done this year? Because, like I say, you've been busy lately.
Ian, believe it or not, I've been keeping track of the number of presentations that I make, and this is the 100th presentation that I'm making this year.
We are honored. 100.
100
in 1 year. That's
Yeah.
great. Well, It's great to have you out there. And like I said in the intro, you have access to all that kind of data, and there's really very few people that can put together that different many data sources to try and figure out what's going on. So, well, it's good that we're keeping you busy.
Yeah, no, I genuinely find this very interesting, and I'm super looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. So speaking of which, let's get into it. I guess, one of the biggest topics, actually kind of after years pre-COVID of kind of years of sort of stability, and it wasn't that interesting of a topic, is inventory. And since 2020, that's been like a roller coaster.
Right.
Both on new and used, different pressures, but up and down. And it's actually, in some years, it's kind of been the defining characteristic of that year. From your kind of point of view, I mean, I know, on the marketplace, obviously I'm looking at the inventory available on the site. It looks to me like this year kind of news come back fairly consistently. Used looked a bit challenging in Q2, but it's kind of roared back just lately. But from the broader industry and the data set, like, what have you been seeing? What's been happening with inventory in 2023?
Yeah, Ian, I can probably, when the time comes, I can probably write a book about the
Right.
what's going on with the inventory in the last couple of years. But jokes aside, looking at new car inventory levels, as you mentioned, they've been going up since August of 2022. So we had this period, obviously, with the microchip shortages and supply chain disruptions and whatnot, but inventory has been going up for over a year now. So looking at the inventory levels on the site, we are now up by 74% on a year-over-year basis. So the trend has been pretty decent, but on the other hand, when you compare the data to 2019 levels, we're still down by around 20%.
Is that on used or new?
This is I'm talking about new inventory.
Or new, okay.
Right, but there's some nuances behind it. So we obviously slice and dice the data by different attributes to understand what's going on in detail. And one thing that's been getting our attention is that domestic inventory, new inventory, as well as European brands, they've been doing really well. Even compared to 2019 levels, there's more availability.
Really?
But if you look at the Asian brands, they are very behind. So Asian brands are the reason behind the fact that we are still seeing low inventory compared to 2019 levels.
Okay, but that's a big moment, right? Because new has been the inventory, the side of the market where the inventory's really been struggling, like you mentioned, because of production and microchips. Just couldn't seem to get going. So from what you're saying, aside from that nuance, for some new car types of origins, they're back where they were at 2019?
Yeah. So both European and domestic brands, they have more inventory compared to 2019 levels.
Okay.
And again, Asian brands are behind, but there's improvement as well. But they're compared to 2019, there's still a bit more to go.
Interesting. And what about the used side of things?
Used and new, they go somewhat hand in hand, right? So as you alluded to in the beginning of the conversation, so the first quarter was pretty rough in terms of used car inventory levels because
I remember it dropped quite a bit.
Yeah, it dropped. So usually, like looking back, the historical data, what we see is the used inventory starts on the higher side in the beginning of the year. They come down in first quarter because usually the first quarter is
the car sales.
Yeah, exactly. But this year, Q1 was very strong in terms of demand, and we saw a big drop in inventory levels in Q1. And then starting in Q2, things have started to improve, but now the trajectory is looking pretty good. So two reasons behind that. One, new car inventory is coming back, right? Mm-hmm. Cars are selling, and then based on data, we know that 50% of a new car sale brings in a trade along with it. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, we'll talk about it in more detail, but there is since the beginning of August of this year, we are seeing a little bit of a slowdown in the used car demand. Okay. So when the demand slows down, obviously the inventory goes up. So these are the two high-level main drivers behind the increase in used inventory.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's interesting you start to talk about demand, because that was something else that was kind of on our list to talk about. Maybe before we do, though, just finishing off on inventory. So now the kind of tough question. So that's what we saw. What are you kind of forecasting, if you want to be so bold as to forecast something? But generally speaking, 2024, what's the outlook? I mean, it sounds like new cars will just continue to kind of roar back. But I mean, is that the case?
Yeah, so to 2024, so we also look at production levels, North America, globally as well. Right. So what we are seeing is that, what we are expecting to see is that there's going to be a bit more modest improvement in new car availability, which is good. But on the used side, I also expect to see some improvement in used car availability. Again, going back to what we just talked about, right? More new car sales, mm-hmm. which we expect to see in 2024, will bring in more trade-ins. Mm-hmm. And assuming that the demand stays on the slower side in 2024, probably that's going to have a positive impact on used car inventory as well.
Okay. And talking about demand, I mean, when you say sort of on the slower side, now I know you mentioned it, thinking about new and used demand, and we'll talk about sort of what we saw through the year. You mentioned it there. Interesting to talk about next year too. And one thing to kind of say is that I think that on the marketplace, we put a lot of effort, cross-functionally, a lot of investment and effort into increasing lead conversion on the marketplace this year. And as we're kind of sitting here, I think used PV leads are up sort of 22% year over year and this kind of thing. Now, all that effort that we've made, not the downside, it's great, and it's great for our dealers, but it's kind of obscured the picture a little bit around consumer demand, because we're optimizing the site more than ever, so lead conversion is going up. But I know that you look at off-site third-party research. You're also looking at actual sales and deals being done and stuff. So what was the shape of the year from a demand standpoint from what you see? Like you mentioned that at the start of the year, really strong demand. Maybe in the last month it's cooled off a little bit?
Yeah, so let's start out with new again. Okay. New demand has been pretty strong since the beginning of the year, because looking at historical new car sales, Ian, between 2017 and 2019, give or take very high level, on average 2 million cars were sold. But if you look at 2020 to 2022, it was like 1.55, 1.6 million. Mm-hmm. So simple calculation, between 2020 and 2022, 1.3 million fewer cars were sold during that period, right? And now going back to what we talked about, inventory availability, inventory is coming back in the market, and that pent-up demand is being satisfied with the inventory that's coming in. Mm-hmm. So there's so this year, new car sales have been pretty strong in double digits on a year-to-date basis. So we expect that probably it's not going to be as strong as 2023 in terms of year-over-year increase.
Because we've seen like some 20%, is that right? In some months?
Yeah. Right. October was 20%
for new car sales. Yeah,
for new car sales. Yeah. Probably it's not going to be in double digits. What we expect to see some improvement in absolute volumes in 2024 as well. So new car is looking solid. On the use side, so what we've been seeing in 2023 is that, as I mentioned, the first quarter started off really strong. Like the first couple of months, like we were looking at double-digit increases compared to year before, and then Q2 was also strong, not as strong, and now Q3. We've started to see a little bit of a slowdown in the last couple of months since the beginning of August.
So I know as well, like you run a kind of consumer confidence intent to buy in the next 6 months study, which I think we do 2 or 3 times a year. How's that looking in terms of consumer demand?
It's actually looking pretty good. So we do that study on a quarterly basis. The last one came out in August of this year, Ian, and compared to COVID, even before COVID, the intention to buy a vehicle is pretty high. It came down a little bit from the May research, but still compared to pre-COVID levels, it's still pretty high. So there are multiple drivers behind this, and you and I, we've talked about this a lot, but high level, we know that. So maybe going back to the beginning of COVID, when we saw a decline in traffic, and then all of a sudden in the beginning of summer, we saw this, big increase in demand. And as we always do, we went back to consumers to understand what's happening in detail. So the research results came back, and probably not too surprising at this point, but they revealed that consumers' interest in public transportation and ride-sharing services had declined by quite a bit for obvious reasons back in the day, right? And looking at some data from StatsCan, we know that a lot of consumers, 83% of consumers, they actually use a private vehicle to get to work, right? So another macro factor. And one other one, household savings rate. Like pre-COVID, household savings rate was around 2.8%. And once the COVID hit, it went up to 28%, 10x, right? Because we couldn't spend our money, right? We couldn't go to restaurants, we couldn't buy clothes, and we couldn't go vacations and whatnot. So there's a lot of accumulation of savings in consumers' bank accounts, and based on the recent data from StatsCan, again, it's sitting around 5.1% as opposed to 2.8 before COVID. So what I'm trying to say is that there's still quite a bit of money in Canadian savings account.
Okay, so interesting stuff on the demand side of things there, Baris. And I guess one topic that has got a lot of attention, including from us. We ran a Carology special on it. But EV, certainly over the last kind of year or two, within that consumer demand conversation, what have we been seeing around electric vehicles specifically?
Yeah, that's a simple question, but not an easy one to answer, because
that's like all the questions.
Pretty much. But so we do have our annual EV research. We ask consumers whether they would consider buying an EV for their next purchase. So what we've seen in the last couple of waves is that in 2023 we saw a bit of a decline. So the intention was 68%. In 2022, and it came down to 56% in 2023. But there are some nuances to it. So we run these surveys in March and April of every year. And if you remember, back in 2022, the Ukrainian and Russian war had just started, and the gas prices had gone up from 1.4 on average to $2 a liter. Right, so we came to work, and I'm sure you remember this, and then we saw this like weird blip in the leads data. We were like, what's going on there? And then we looked into it, and it was the EV leads went up by 567% on a year-over-year basis, and EV searches were up by 89%. So there's a direct correlation between what's happening with gas prices and EV demand. So now, come forward to 2023, things are different, obviously, right? Gas prices have come down a little bit, and what we are seeing is with especially with pricing and what's happening in the macro environment, there's these factors have a direct impact on EV demand. So we believe that these are the main factors behind the decline in demand for EVs. On the supply side, though, the picture is very different. So when we looked at our EV inventory on the site, it's up by 800% on a year-over-year basis.
Wow.
Yeah. So supply is going up and demand is coming down. So guess what happens to the prices?
Yeah.
Prices have come down. So that's one reason. And the second reason is, as you may know, Elon Musk has been playing around with Tesla prices for quite a while. So we wanted to see, okay, so when new Tesla prices come down, what happens to the used Tesla prices? We did that analysis, and then there's a direct correlation. 30% decline in Tesla prices, 30% decline in used Tesla prices.
So interesting stuff there, Baris, on the consumer demand kind of things and with the EVs. I guess staying with the consumer for a moment, from a consumer behavior standpoint, in the last few years, digital retail has been a huge kind of talking topic, and we've seen some really interesting things happening, you know, with Carvana down in the States, and then here in Canada, Canada Drives, who made a big pivot early in 2023 and kind of went back to their kind of former business model and moved away from the digital retail, digital dealer side of things. We've still got Clutch and that kind of thing. How has kind of our understanding of consumers and what they want from digital retail evolved? So you're doing the research, you know, you're asking consumers about digital retail. It feels like the game has changed since the kind of since the heat of the pandemic in 2020, 2021.
Yeah.
What are you seeing?
No, for sure, Ian. So, you know, looking at the all of these companies globally, right? During the pandemic, obviously that was the hot thing to do.
Yeah.
And now things are being somewhat normalized. You know, we're kind of reverting back, I guess.
Right.
So
in a lot of industries,
right?
Actually, I've seen data on other things where not complete reversion, but you can see over the last 18 months, 2 years, kind of things.
Yeah.
Like some things are tracing back.
Right.
Yeah.
So same goes for buying a vehicle, right? So again, going back to research, we know the vast majority of the consumers, they want to do some parts of it online, right? Like, am I going to be pre-qualified? I want to pre-qualify for financing. I want to finance online. But on the other hand, when I'm actually buying the vehicle, I want to kick the tires. I want to go for a test drive.
Yeah.
So it's not super straightforward. So yeah, no, I mean, I think you summarized it really well.
Okay, so Baris, we're coming towards the end of our time together here. And I know we touched on it a couple of times already, but prices, right? Prices is something that I know you spend a lot of time thinking about with your team, because the AutoTrader Price Index is a property that you guys put together quarterly. It's been a huge success. So, you know, I see even kind of the big banks like Scotiabank referencing it in their economic updates, as well as all the major media outlets and news channels like Global and CTV. They're always interviewing you and asking what's happening with prices. So let's talk quickly about new and used vehicle prices. What's happened in 2023 and what are you expecting for 2024?
Yeah. No, Ian, so first of all, we are very proud of that work that we do. We have a really good understanding of the market, and we, as you know, we crunch that data on a real-time basis. So that's pretty much what I do every morning when I get to work, to see what's happening with prices. So there's a lot of attention for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So kudos to the team for making that available on a daily basis. But going back to your question, so new car prices have been up by quite a bit. By looking at October data, we are seeing a 17.4% year-over-year increase. And prices had been going up on a monthly basis for over 2 years up until last month.
Yeah.
And last month, for the first time, not a big decline, but we saw some decline in prices. And again, right before this meeting, I actually took a quick look at what's happening for prices in November. And
are you addicted to the price index, Baris?
So I believe it or not, I sometimes even check it out on the weekends. But,
Okay,
So November, the same trend. slight decline again on a month-over-month basis. So probably we've hit the peak.
Is this to do with the inventory coming back?
Inventory is coming back,
Yeah.
right? And cars are getting sold, so which is obviously good. But again, when I look at the data, the prices are coming back for the brands that have the inventory,
Right.
which makes sense,
Does
right?
make sense, yeah.
So, and again, it's great to be able to make these connections based on the data that we look at and we see in the market. So, again, 2024, again, probably we've hit the peak on new car prices, Ian. Is it going to go flat or is it going to come down? We don't expect a substantial decline in prices anytime soon, both for new and used at this point, because as I said, we expect the demand to stay strong, consistent in the next couple of years. On the used side, the trends are a little different. They're still up by 4% on a year-over-year basis. But
So that's quite a bit cooler than new.
right.
Has that been the case all year in 23? Used has been...
Used had gone up until June, July, middle of summer,
Yeah.
and then it's been coming down. Again, going back to what we talked about,
The inventory come back.
inventory coming back, demand slowing down slightly, and the prices are reflecting what's happening in the market. So, again, November data, it's not the end of the month yet, but which is very interesting that I should mention is that we are seeing the largest monthly decline in prices on a month-over-month basis. So even in the peak of the pandemic, prices came down by around 1.4% on a monthly basis. But looking at the November data, I'm seeing a 1.9%. Again, it's not conclusive just yet, but it feels like the correction is happening a little bit more substantially on the used side.
Okay. But I guess, I mean, both of them have been at some giddy heights for
Right.
a couple of years.
That is correct.
In terms of pricing.
That is correct. And again, going back to your question about our expectations for 2024, there might be some correction, but we don't expect to go back to $25,000 levels anymore.
It's all about context, isn't it? Yeah, so
Correct.
1.9%, but it's way up on where it was a few
Correct.
years ago.
Correct.
That's great. And from an AutoTrader price index standpoint, I know, because I read the report, in that you go into all kinds of detail, right, about body style and regions and what's up, down, sideways, and that's quarterly. I guess folks can get that if they follow AutoTrader on LinkedIn.
Yeah. The B2B team publishes it on a quarterly basis, and you can find it. I also share it. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see it on that platform.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you so much for spending the time with me and the audience today and taking us through what you see from all that data that you have at your disposal. It really is astonishing in terms of 23, and being bold enough to make some predictions for 24. So we'll keep you honest. We'll have you back this time next year, and we'll see whether or not you were right about those things.
Yeah, no, great conversation, Ian. Thanks for hosting. I appreciate it.
You're so welcome. So thanks everyone for joining us as we put a bow on 2023. And as I said, if you'd like to stay up to date, be sure to follow AutoTrader.ca on LinkedIn. The link is in the description of this video. So until we speak again, all of us here want to wish you a happy holidays and a prosperous 2024. Let's get out there and move some metal together like we always do. Cheers.